Okay, so welcome to this video. This is going over the export process. A few people have struggled with it a bit. So I've pre-recorded this on one of the lab machines to make sure that it all works. And it does, which is good. And it kind of shows you for the artists what I would say is probably the best setup for doing. So essentially the first thing I go through here is where you can get the asset previewer from, and I would use the asset previewer as your base for creating the structure that you need to organize your files so that it knows to look in the right place for shaders and things like that. If you do it this way, I've gone round the groups and had a look, and all the groups are using the same setup. So there may be more things in their media folders, but they will have this setup, which we'll go through in a minute. So I'll just start this again, and so I'm basically going to the resources section on the shoe space page for 3D Games prototyping, and I'm clicking on asset previewer, which is there, this is 17.0 on this one, and I'm going to download. I've got this already set up though, so I've got this unpacked and on my desktop just as a folder, and that's fine. And as we look inside here, I'm just going to pause this and we'll go back. So what we've got here is we have, in this top level, we have a models directory and we have shaders directory. And if you look at the projects with the coders, for all the reveal based projects and all the PhyreEngine projects, they have this setup. They have a models folder and they have a shaders folder. As artists, we need to put things in the models folder, but it's important that you know where the shaders folder is. The May uses a relative path, the PhyreEngine files, the DAE files that are used, use a relative path. So that basically means that they are not interested above this level where it's coming from. It's not an absolute path. It doesn't matter that it's C, underscore users slash, I don't know, wherever it's pointing. It's only going to take into consideration that wherever the file is, it can look back up the chain and find the models folder and the shaders folder, and then within that shaders folder it will find the shader it needs, which means that you should be able to take the folders that are inside this models folder, which are your assets that you've created, and if you create them with the shaders folder on the same level, you should be able to take this, a folder that's like the globe or whatever it is you've made, and you should be able to take it and put it on another machine that has a models and shaders folder set up exactly the same as this, and drop it in, and it should work if it has the same shaders that you're using. Anyway, so what I'm looking at here is the list of shaders that are in the asset preview, which should be all of them, including these RV ones, which are the reveal ones. So if I click on this is the reveal PBR shader. So this is like the Phyre PBR shader, but it's actually been optimized. So this one I would recommend for most things, is if you're using a reveal project, is ideal because it compiles a lot quicker. But if you look up here, the Phyre PBR one is there too. So if we go into the models folder, I have a folder called Art Globe, and within that I have my DAE file, which is the file that PhyreEngine uses. That's the collider export. I have my Maya file, and then I have all the DDS files. So the AL in this case is the albedo, which is the color texture, Then I have a metalness map, which is metal.dds, and then I've got the normal map, which is nrm.dds, and these are all named. So the ART, so this is just something we used for reveal, but the ART basically means it's an artifact. Its name, so it's globe, and the B broom basically means it's part of the, it lives in the breakfast room. And so we have the Maya file is called that, the DAE is called that, and the textures are called that as well. So we lose them all the way down from albedo, metalness, normal map, and roughness. The other thing that's in here is this batch preview, which I'll show you in a minute. But essentially, everything that lives in this folder, if the textures and the exported file and the Maya file all live together, then there's not a lot can go wrong, other than it can't find the shader. So if we take the DAE file and I drag it over this process preview asset batch file, then what it'll do is which I've done a video on already, so this shouldn't be news to anyone, but what it will do is it'll actually fire up the previewer and just let you double check that everything works. So essentially what you're looking for is for nothing to come out red, because if basically the red stuff, the red lines of text show you there's an issue. So when it's compiled, it'll basically give you this, if there were no errors, you can pick either N to do normal rendering or P to do PBR rendering. As this is PBR based, we hit P and we can use the right mouse button and basically scroll up and down to zoom in and out. And then, yeah, so we know that that's working. So the previewer is a good way of validating your models, as well as they have all the shaders and everything there and the same structure that you need. So they're generally good. Right, so here we are. Let me just stop that now. So when you fire Maya up in the lab, it should have this tab along here which says SIE, and within that there should be this tools icon here, and if you click on this, this will give you the tools you need for setting up and exporting a model. If you can't see it, if it's not there, then it probably just needs starting. And now when we first started this project, we were trying to get people to install this, fire this stuff up themselves, but we ended up just manually installing it on every machine, so it should work. However, if this doesn't show up, then you just go to the shelf tab here on the little gear icon, and then go to new shelf. And I'm going to demonstrate here. Click on new shelf, and then type in capital letters SIE, and then hit OK. And what it should do is it will generate this for you. It's not that it's not there, it's just not showing up. So, but once you get there, you can click on the tools icon, and this will open this SIE Collada tools. So the first one, if this says switch to CGFX mode, requires restarting Maya, then this environment is set correctly. If it says switch to DirectX mode, then you need to hit that and then let it restart, because essentially the things we're making are in DirectX, so we need this to be in DirectX. So if it's asking you to switch to CGFX, it means it's already in DirectX, which is good. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this switch perspective viewport to viewport 2.0. If you select that, then it basically means that the shading in the viewport will fit and will allow you to preview the shaders correctly. Is there anything else in here? So here, this part here, create new PBR shader. This is where if we press this, then essentially it will set up a shader for us, or the kind of container for a shader. So once we want to make a new shader, if we click that button, it will build one for us, which is handy. And then just before I close this, because I think I'm just about to miss it, There's a couple other things in here. Generate 3-point light rig. If you click on this, it will basically set some basic lighting up for you, which when you're trying to preview normal maps and things, you're going to need. And the other one is delete unused shader nodes. This is really useful because one of the common things you have, the issues you're going to have with these, is when you save them out, because they may have come in with textures, or there may be something deep in the file that you can't see that's making reference to something outside of the outside of Maya. They're the sort of things that cause you problems in PhyreEngine later on down the line. So they're the things that if you delete the unused shader nodes at the end, it will get rid of everything that you don't need. So let me move that around the space a little bit. Perfect. So I'm just going to import a model. So this could be, I'm just going to use one of the DAEs I've already got, but this could be an FBX or whatever you're using, Max, whatever you want. It could come into here. And at this point I don't mind too much where it's come from. So I'm using this Beethoven statue, which is using the wrong shader at the minute, so and has no lighting, so it looks garbage. It has a Lambert 1 attached to it at the moment, which we don't want. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set up the folder structure. So I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it Beef Oven, but we know it's different from Beethoven. So that's going to be my asset folder. And now, for the purpose of just making this work, I'm going to grab the 3 textures that the Beethoven statue uses, which is an albedo, a normal map and a roughness map. And if I'd made these originally for Beef Oven, these would have been called Beef Oven, and I would have dropped them in there ready to go. So we're nice and prepared. I'm saving my scene because we know this stuff crashes, and I'm going to save it in my models directory in the Beef Oven folder, and I'm going to call it Beef Oven. Save as Beef Oven. There we go. And now I'm going to change the name of the model to Beef Oven as well. Just get nice and neat. So I've got my model. Now I want to create a shader. So create new PBR shader. I decided I'm going to start with the prefix mat for material, and then I'm just going to call it Beef Oven. So my model's called Beef Oven, my material's called Beef Oven. And I want to apply that material to the object. So I go to assign existing material and select the material. So now when we look in the attribute editor at the very end, I no longer have the Lambert 1 shader, I have Matte Beef Oven as my shader. In here I'm going and finding the shader to repath it. So basically what I've got here is this shader file is basically pointing at the standard Phyre PBR shader, which I'm going to change. And you need to find the path to where the shaders live in the structure that you're working. So in this case we're working with the asset previewer, so we need to go inside the asset previewer and find the shaders folder, because we're in the models folder inside the asset previewer, so we need to find the shaders folder in there, and then we can create, when we export out, it will create a relative path between the two. So it's a bit confusing, but once you've done it a couple of times it kind of makes sense. So now we need to go and find the right shader file to attach to this, and then that will give it the profile within this so it understands what it needs to do. So I'm going into the shaders folder. So in asset previewer /shaders, here's all the shaders, and I'm going to go and find that RV PBR shader again. So I hit open, and then that gets applied to that. And we can't see anything much here because essentially we don't have anything applied to it, and also there's no lighting in this scene currently. So it's just like a cool silhouette. So if we open here, we can see that we need a normal map sampler and a texture sampler, but we've got nothing for the other areas. So if we look in here, we have already ticked cast shadows, lighting, normal maps, receive shadows, texture cavity, we have texture, which basically is this one here, and we have normal maps here, which is this one here. So we've got the texture, the albedo, we've got the normal map, but we also need a roughness slot. So this is this one here, texture roughness. So we basically need to tick that, and then it will create a new slot for us up here. And there we go, we have a roughness sampler. So if you just click on these icons, we can then basically grab our textures that we've saved in the right folder. In models, beef oven, and there's all my textures. So I need the albedo, the texture sampler as it calls it here. And there we go. Now I need to add the normal map. Same process. But now I'm already in the right directory, so this starts making it easier. We can't see the normal map because no lighting. So there's nothing to use the normal map to. So if I generate a 3-point light rig there, then essentially it will generate some lighting for us, which is handy. So clicking on that will give us the outliner, and if we look here, we've got this Collada lights group, and that has all the lights inside it. Delete it, there you go. If I create it again, it's there. The thing is, you don't want to send this out with your scene. Now you can set it up in the export so that it ignores lights, and that usually does the trick. You need to be careful with that one, because it will you will end up having tons and tons of lights in your scene by accident, because essentially one of the things with this exporter is export selected does not work. It exports everything out of the scene. So you've got to be really careful with that one, but you can exclude things, like you can tell it to not export lights. So it's probably a good idea, and I think I'll show you at the end of this how to do that. So now I'm going to put my roughness on here, although this has very consistent roughness, so it doesn't really do a lot. And there you go, that's beef oven set up, more or less. Saving the scene again, because you know, safety first. So now I'm just opening up the Hypershade. I've gone the long way round to find that. If you want to find it quickly, it's here, but I think it made more sense to show you where it actually is. So Hypershade's used to basically preview what materials are in the scene. You don't need to go through this process particularly. I just wanted to show it was there, and that you can kind of remove what happens when you remove shaders you don't need. So this has some basic shaders that you can't really get rid of, and it has the material beef oven. So if I delete unused shader node, you can see that these three materials don't really go anywhere. But if I created a new one, just anything, then this shader is not attached to any objects. So if I delete the unused shader node, it's gone. But if I exported that out, there's a good chance that would have gone out with it, and it's just data that doesn't need to be there. So when it's all done, set up, you can export the mesh. It'll go through the process of exporting it, and it exports it to, guess where? Models, beef oven. There he is, and he's called beef oven, and he's a Collada file. The other way to do it is to just go to export, selection, or all, or whatever. I'm just going to, I think, so one of the things you can do is delete the lights and then export the mesh, and that should work. So that's one way you can do it. The other way you can do it is if you leave your lights on, you go up to File, Selection, and then you can actually use the Collada exporter, and then check certain things that you need. So let's let's have a look in here. So, so you need to be on the collider exporter, which is this one. And the things you need to know are the relative paths is checked. That will give you, that will mean that it will work in a file structure as long as it can find the shaders folder in the right place. It will be fine. And the other thing is to make sure that you switch lights off in the filter export, and then it shouldn't take the lights with it, which I'm just showing here. So once you're happy, all you've got to do is just hit export selection. And that works exactly the same way, and then you end up with it. And I think that if you set that up how you want it to work, then every time you go to hit export mesh, it works the same way. So if we want to test this out, now we can go and grab the top level. There's one of these process and preview asset batch files. If I Control C to copy it and then Control V to paste it in there, I can drop the beef oven DAE on top of it and we can test it out. Leave it to run, let it do its magic. As long as there's no red, we're good to go. There we go. So if we hit P, it should fire up. Use the right mouse button and just scroll down to bring him into view. And there we go. Beef oven. Done. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to basically delete part of that so you can see that when the path in, you basically break the path in, how it doesn't work. So we've got basically this stuff in red now because I've deleted the normal map and it's looking for it specifically in that place, in the same part of the structure that the DAE is in, and it can't find it. So it's basically telling you, I can't find it, and that's bad. So they're the things you probably, if you get those kind of issues, it's basically not going to work. So if I run it, it will still run, but as you can see we've got this jazz happening. And if you're wondering what that is basically a checkerboard pattern that is there to show that there's a texture missing. The texture missing is a normal map, so it's putting it in the normal channel and it's making a right mess of it. So that's basically how that works. Now the last thing I wanted to show, so as long as it's got this structure here, models and shaders together like that, and then you put your models inside the model folder, you know, in their own folder with their own textures, it should work. Now this last bit I wanted to show when you're bringing a Maya file in. You can see it's updated this as well. Look, it's broken. The normal map's broken. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring a file in, and it's going to show you what classically happens when you try and open up a file like a Maya file that's already been worked on. It kind of freaks people out. Here we go. So we're going to open the globe. Let's not save beef oven. Yay, here we go. Green world. Hey, what's wrong with this globe? It's green. It's basically this pathing for the shader. So all you've got to do is just basically go and find it. So we're in the right place and we've just got to click on it. So we're looking for the RV PBR. Hit open. And then it's fine. Weird. Drop the light rig in again and we can see that we're getting a fairly nice response from it. The Maya view is generally pretty good, apart from it seems to struggle with metals a bit. So metal materials it seems to have a bit of a problem with. But beyond that, it seems to work. Oh yeah, and the only thing I'm showing here is that basically this has a metal channel, so it's using metallicity as an option. It all works. So there you go. That works.